Hello, my dear friends, and welcome back to Grandma Lily English. I'm so happy to have you here with us again because today we are going to continue and finally complete Alice's incredible adventure in Wonderland. In our last episode, Alice entered a beautiful garden and met a mysterious caterpillar sitting quietly on a large green leaf. He looked at her with calm, thoughtful eyes and asked her a very simple question. "Who are you?" Alice wanted to answer, but after everything that had happened, she wasn't completely sure anymore. Today she is about to meet even stranger characters, face some difficult situations, and discover that Wonderland is not quite what it seems. So get comfortable, listen carefully, and enjoy the final part of Alice's adventure. And before we begin, if you have been following Alice's story with us, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Grandma Lily English, and tell us in the comments what your favorite part of Wonderland has been so far. Now, let's return to Wonderland. Alice looked at the caterpillar sitting quietly on the large green leaf. For a few moments, she didn't know what to say. The caterpillar looked at her again and slowly asked, "Who are you?" Alice thought about the question. It sounded simple, but somehow it was not simple at all. I'm Alice," she finally answered. The caterpillar raised one eyebrow. "Are you sure?" Alice looked surprised. "What do you mean?" The caterpillar remained perfectly calm. "You have changed several times since you arrived here. You have become smaller, and now you are trying to understand a world where almost nothing makes sense." Alice looked down at herself and sighed. "I suppose you're right." The caterpillar smiled slightly. "Then perhaps you should stop trying to understand everything around you and start asking yourself what you really want." Alice was quiet. She had never thought about it that way before. "What I really want," she repeated softly. Before she could say anything more, the caterpillar pointed toward a small path between the trees. "If you want answers, you must keep walking." Alice looked down the mysterious path. She could see colorful flowers, strange mushrooms, and tiny lights moving between the trees. "Where does that path lead?" she asked. The caterpillar gave her a strange smile. "That depends on where you want to go." Alice took a deep breath. She thanked the caterpillar and began walking along the path. She didn't know where it would take her, but this time she wasn't afraid. She was curious. And in Wonderland, curiosity was always the beginning of something new. Alice followed the narrow path through the trees until she began to hear strange sounds coming from somewhere nearby. There was laughter, the sound of cups moving across a table, and someone singing a song that Alice had never heard before. She walked closer and discovered a long table beneath a large tree. 3 unusual characters were sitting around it. There was a man wearing a very large hat, a sleepy-looking creature sitting beside him, and a small rabbit who kept looking nervously at a pocket watch. The man with the large hat suddenly noticed Alice. "Ah, a visitor," Alice smiled politely. "Hello, may I join you?" The Mad Hatter looked at the empty chair beside him. "Of course. There is always room for one more at tea time." Alice sat down and looked around the table. There were cups everywhere, but nobody seemed to be drinking anything. The Hatter picked up a teapot. "Would you like some tea?" "Yes, please." The Hatter quickly moved the cup away. "Then you must move to another seat." Alice looked confused. "Why?" The Hatter pointed toward the chair. "Because this seat is already taken." Alice looked at the empty chair. "But nobody is sitting there," the Hatter smiled. "That doesn't mean nobody owns it." Alice didn't understand at all. Suddenly, the little rabbit looked at his pocket watch. "Oh dear, I'm late. I'm very, very late." Alice looked at him. "Late for what?" The rabbit didn't answer. He jumped from his chair and hurried away between the trees. Alice watched him disappear. "This place gets stranger every minute," she said. The Hatter laughed. "Strange? No, no. Wonderland is perfectly normal." Alice smiled. "I don't think we have the same idea of normal." The Hatter leaned closer and asked, "Tell me, Alice, why is a raven like a writing desk?" Alice stared at him. "I have no idea." The Hatter smiled. "Neither do I." Alice laughed. For the first time since entering Wonderland, she completely forgot how strange everything was. But then she noticed something moving beyond the trees. A long line of playing card soldiers was marching toward them. The Hatter suddenly stopped laughing. He looked at Alice and lowered his voice. "You should probably leave now." Alice stood up. "Why?" The Hatter pointed toward the approaching soldiers. "Because the Queen is coming." Alice looked down the path. The sound of marching footsteps grew louder and louder. Then a voice echoed through the garden. "Make way for the Queen." Alice took a deep breath. She suddenly realized that her adventure was about to become much more dangerous. Alice stood quietly beside the Mad Hatter as the sound of marching footsteps grew louder. A moment later, a long line of playing card soldiers appeared between the trees. Behind them came a tall woman, wearing a magnificent red dress and a golden crown. Everyone immediately stopped what they were doing. The Mad Hatter leaned toward Alice and whispered, "The Queen of Hearts." Alice watched as the Queen walked toward them. She looked around angrily. "Who is this girl?" Alice took a small step forward. "My name is Alice." The Queen stared at her. "And what are you doing in my Wonderland?" Alice looked around. "I'm not sure. I was following a white rabbit, and then I fell down a very long hole." The Queen frowned. "That is not a good reason to enter my kingdom." Alice tried to remain calm. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but I didn't exactly choose to come here." The Queen raised her hand. "Off with her head." Alice's eyes grew wide, but before the soldiers could move, she took a deep breath and found her courage. "No." Everyone became silent. The Queen looked shocked. "What did you say?" Alice stood a little taller. "I said no. You cannot simply punish people because they disagree with you." The Queen became furious. "Who do you think you are?" Alice looked at her. For a moment she remembered the caterpillar's question. "Who are you?" Suddenly she understood. She didn't need anyone else to tell her who she was. "I'm Alice," she said confidently. "I may not understand this place, but I know what is right and what is wrong." The Queen shouted, "Catch her!" The soldiers began running toward Alice. Alice turned and ran through the garden as fast as she could. She passed the flowers, jumped over a small stream, and hurried between the trees while the Queen and her soldiers chased her. Alice kept running until she reached a strange open field. There was nowhere else to go. She turned around. The Queen was getting closer. Alice took a deep breath and shouted, "You're only a pack of cards." Suddenly, the wind began to blow. The cards flew into the air. The Queen disappeared. The garden disappeared. Everything around Alice began to spin faster and faster. Alice closed her eyes. Then, everything became quiet. She slowly opened her eyes, and suddenly, she was no longer in Wonderland. Alice opened her eyes and found herself lying beneath the old tree where she had been sitting before her strange adventure began. For a moment she didn't move. She looked around carefully. There was no Queen of Hearts. There were no playing card soldiers. There was no Mad Hatter, no caterpillar, and no white rabbit. Everything was quiet. Alice slowly sat up and looked at the sky. Warm afternoon sunlight was shining through the branches, and the gentle sound of birds filled the air. Then she heard a familiar voice. "Wake up, Alice. You've been sleeping for a long time." Alice looked up and saw her sister sitting beside her. Alice rubbed her eyes. "Where am I?" Her sister smiled. "You're under the tree. You fell asleep while you were sitting here." Alice looked around in amazement. Was it all a dream? Her sister laughed gently. "Perhaps. What did you dream about?" Alice began telling her everything. She told her about the white rabbit, the tiny door, the mysterious bottle, the caterpillar, the Mad Hatter, and the Queen of Hearts. Her sister listened carefully and smiled. When Alice finished, she looked toward the path where she had first seen the white rabbit. For a moment, she thought she saw something white moving between the trees. She stood up quickly. "Wait!" But there was nothing there. Alice smiled. Maybe it had been a rabbit. Maybe it had only been the wind. She would never know for sure. As she walked home with her sister, Alice thought about everything she had learned. She had entered Wonderland because she was curious. She had become afraid because she didn't understand what was happening. But along the way, she had discovered something important. She didn't always need to know exactly where a path would lead. Sometimes she simply needed to be brave enough to take the next step. Alice looked up at her sister and smiled. "I think I'm going to remember Wonderland for the rest of my life." Her sister smiled back. "I think you will remember it for a very long time." Alice laughed, and together they walked home beneath the warm evening sky. The adventure was over, but somewhere deep inside Alice, a new adventure had just begun. What a beautiful ending to Alice's adventure. Before we say goodbye to Wonderland, let's learn 3 useful English words and expressions from today's story. Expression 1. Curious. Curious means wanting to know or discover something. For example, Alice was curious about Wonderland. Now say it with me. Curious. Excellent. Expression 2. Courage. Courage means the ability to do something even when you feel afraid. For example, Alice found the courage to stand up to the Queen. Let's say it together. Courage. Very good. Expression 3. Wake up. Wake up means to stop sleeping and become conscious. For example, Alice woke up under the old tree. One more time. Wake up. Wonderful. Now let's practice 3 complete sentences together. Alice was curious about Wonderland. She found the courage to say no. Alice woke up under the tree. Excellent. And remember, you don't need to memorize every word. Listen to English often, understand the meaning from the story, and slowly, English will become more natural for you. Alice's adventure may have happened in a dream, but the lesson she learned was very real. Sometimes we enter situations we don't understand. We may feel confused, afraid, or even lost, but we don't always need to know exactly what will happen next. Sometimes we simply need to be brave enough to take the next step. And that brings us to today's grammar point. Past simple. We use the past simple to talk about actions that happened in the past. Listen to these examples from Alice's story. Alice followed the white rabbit. She drank from the bottle. She met the caterpillar. She found the courage to face the queen. She woke up under the old tree. Now, let's look at the verbs. Follow, arrow. Follow, drink, arrow. Drank, meet, arrow. Met, find, arrow. Found, wake, arrow. Woke. Some verbs are regular, like followed, while others are irregular, like drank, met, found, and woke. Let's practice them one more time. Alice followed the rabbit. Alice met the caterpillar. Alice found her courage. Alice woke up under the tree. Excellent. When you listen to English stories, try to notice these past tense verbs. They will help you understand when something happened, and they will also make it easier for you to tell your own stories in English. So don't just memorize the verbs. Listen to them, use them, and little by little, they will become natural for you. Alice's journey through Wonderland has finally come to an end. But perhaps the most important part of her adventure is what she discovered about herself. At the beginning of the story, Alice followed the white rabbit because she was curious. She didn't know where the path would lead, and she didn't know what she would find. She certainly didn't expect to meet a talking caterpillar, a strange hatter, or a very angry queen. But step by step, Alice became braver. She learned to ask questions. She learned to make her own choices. And when she was afraid, she learned something very important. Courage doesn't mean you are never scared. Courage means you keep going even when you are scared. Tomorrow, when you face something new, remember Alice. You may not know exactly what will happen. You may not feel completely ready, but sometimes you don't need to know the whole path. You only need to take the next step. So keep asking questions, keep learning, keep exploring, and never lose your curiosity, because just like Alice discovered, the most interesting adventures often begin when we dare to take the next step. And now, my dear friends, it's time for this week's challenge. This week, I want you to think about a time when you were afraid to try something new. Maybe you were afraid to speak English. Maybe you were afraid to meet someone new. Or maybe you were simply afraid of making a mistake. Now write one sentence in the past simple about that experience. For example, I was afraid, but I tried. Or, I made a mistake, but I learned something new. You can also write, I was nervous, but I didn't give up. Now it's your turn. Write your sentence in the comments. And please don't worry about making mistakes. Mistakes are part of learning. Every time you try to speak or write in English, you are taking another step forward. So just like Alice, be curious, be brave, and keep moving forward. Keep learning, keep practicing, and I'll see you in our next story.
Grandma, I think I finally understand why Alice's adventure was so special.
Why is that, Noah?
Because Alice didn't just discover Wonderland. She discovered something about herself. She learned to be curious, to ask questions, and most importantly, to be brave when things became difficult.
That's right, my dear Noah. And perhaps that is what every great story can teach us. We may not know where our journey will take us, but we can always choose how we move forward. Thank you, my dear friends, for joining us throughout Alice's adventure. If you enjoyed this story and want to keep improving your English with us, please like this video, subscribe to Grandma Lily English, and share it with someone who is learning English too. And before you go, tell us in the comments, what did Alice teach you?
We'll see you next time with another beautiful story and another English adventure.
Until then, keep learning, keep listening, keep asking questions, and never be afraid to take the next step. Goodbye, my dear friends.
Goodbye, everyone. See you in our next English adventure.